Hey guys, in this video series we will be removing and replacing the turbos on a BMW 335i. Now this is a relatively challenging job, but if you take everything step by step, it's definitely doable at home. As you may be familiar with 335i's, they tend to get a wastegate rattle issue around 200,000 kilometers, and the only real way of fixing them is that you have to replace the turbos. Now if you are putting all this work into replacing the turbos, this might be a good chance or good idea to upgrade them. Regardless, there are two major ways which you can two major routes you can take to remove the turbos. The first one is that you have to remove the engine and transmission assembly together. The second way is you leave the engine where it is and you drop the subframe. Once the subframe is out, you can see the turbos right there, and everything is relatively easy to access. I am actually done replacing my turbos, removing the turbos actually, and I would strongly suggest that if you haven't started yet, just remove the engine and transmission together, because if you remove the subframe and you don't have an engine hoist, everything is really crammed up and just crawling in there is a bit of a hassle. I wouldn't recommend it, but if you see later on in the video how crammed up it is, and if you think this route will work for you, of course, go for it. But yeah, that's everything. I will go over an example of a good turbo and a bad turbo before we jump right into removing everything and tearing everything down, so you guys can have an idea what actually goes bad in the turbos. So yeah, let's stay tuned, and hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. So guys, here for comparison I have two of the turbos. The one on the left is actually a good turbo. This is off of a car that has only 110,000 kilometers. I won't be putting this on, but I just got my hands on it. And this is the turbo, the bad turbo that came off of it, actually one of them. And if you have a look at the flap here, look at how much play it has. And if it has this much play, it's almost half an inch, I would say. There's no way the turbo's sealing. And if you have a look at the rod here, the rod clip was also missing, so the rod could just pop out. I didn't take out the clip to dramatize the situation. It was just, this is just the way it is. And yeah, believe it or not, these turbos, the compressor wheel is still good. There's no play in it. Even if you grab it from the back, there's no play in it. It's fine. It's just unfortunate that the wastegate situation on these turbos is bad, because when they do go bad, it's the actual wastegate that creates trouble. It's not the compressor wheel. But regardless, they'll be getting replaced, and yeah, we'll get started now. So far, we started off putting the car in the air and putting some jack stands underneath. I first started off removing the tie rods. Now on this side it came out really easily. There is a T40 socket you use to hold the tie rod itself in place, just like this. And then the nut comes out with a 13/16 wrench, which is not too bad. Now on the other end, since I have a higher kilometer car, it has a bit of rust on it, and on this end my bolt actually seized up a little bit. So when you do take it out, just make sure you take all the precautions, spray some penetrating fluid, do all you can just to make sure you don't strip the tie rod, which I ended up doing in my case. So here we are, guys, with the tie rod removed, and my apologies guys, I have skipped a few steps. Now we went ahead and took out two control arms, this one and this one right here. Both of them use 18mm bolts. It's honestly, it's relatively straightforward to get to these. And you also have to take out these sway bar links, because the sway bar itself, this bar and the rack and pinion will drop together with the subframe. Since we are removing the rack and pinion, we do have to remove 3 bolts from the bottom here. 2 of them are right there. That is for the power steering lines, and the third one is I believe it's a T10 bolt. That actually connects the steering shaft, if you can see up here, the steering shaft to the rack and pinion. So once these 3 are out, the rack and pinion should be free from the body, and we should be able to drop it right with the subframe. Once it's loose, should come out like this, and now in theory we should be able to separate the steering shaft now. Now so far I haven't had much luck getting the steering shaft out. I've hammered it a lot, but it just seems to be really seized in place. So now I have decided that I'm just going to remove the whole rack and pinion, just have it a little bit lower, so maybe that way we're able to wiggle out the steering shaft. Other than that, there is this line going through, and it's held on by 2 rubber bushings and 2 tiny bolts. As you can see, both of my rubber bushings actually broke off as I was trying to remove them. So yeah, we'll just be putting 2 new bushings on. So removing the rack and pinion should be pretty simple. At the top we have a 5/8 wrench, and at the bottom we're just gonna have a T12 socket, and this should do the trick. Now with the 2 bolts out, the rack and pinion is completely free. Besides, of course, we still have the 2 lines attached. I'm just going to pull this down just a teeny tiny bit so I can have better access. So as of now, we've undone both of the bolts. One of them is a 22, the other one is a 19mm. So far, I've been playing around with the steering shaft quite a while now, and unfortunately, it's really seized, and I have no luck with it. So I'm gonna put everything back together and not do the turbos. No, I'm just kidding. Turns out, at the top, we also have a similar bolt like we did at the bottom of the steering shaft. So I am going to undo this bolt. It's a very similar principle, and the bolt is also really easy to find. You may not be able to see it in video, but you use a few extensions. It's E11. Fortunately enough, as soon as the bolt came out, the steering shaft pretty much fell out on its own, which is really good news as it makes my life really easy. Even though the bottom end was seized, the top end we were able to unattach. And here we have the rack and pinion. Now with the rack and pinion out of the way, we're actually really close to our goal. At this point, we just need to take off this plastic shield. It uses 3 8mm bolts and 1 10mm bolt. Other than that, on each of the side, we have a T14, 2 T14 bolts on each side holding the engine mount to the subframe. Yeah, we're gonna go ahead and take those out. Now guys, as of right now, we are totally ready to drop the subframe. But before we do that, we do need to give the engine some sort of a support. As you know, we took out the engine mounts, but however, the transmission mounts of the car are still intact. All you have to do is you need some sort of an engine hoist, and you can hook this tow hook onto the engine itself. It goes on right in the middle here, which is really convenient, and this tow hook is conveniently located right in the trunk of your car. If it's still there, if you bought the car used, it might not be there. But anyways, I will get my engine crane out and just set the camera here while I set up everything. So here we have it, guys. The engine hoist is all set up. What I really like about this setup is that I can still close my garage while this engine is being held up in place, just in case I take a few days to finish this project off. And you might be able to tell the engine is lifting just a tiny bit. That's because, of course, it's not attached to the subframe. Just want to give it a little bit of a tug while we sneak away the subframe from underneath it. And taking the subframe out is really easy now. It's just a whole few bolts, one bolt here, so pretty much one bolt at each corner, one right there, so 2 on this side, 2 on the other side. But of course we also need to take off this cradle, and there's a bolt for it here, bolt right here as well, and in the center as well. So as of now, all of the subframe bolts are out. We have 6 18mm bolts, and we also have 6 bolts for this middle cradle. It's a 5/8, but you don't really have to take all the bolts out for the cradle. You can just take out the, instead of the 6, take out 2 at the very end, 1 each side, and the cradle should drop with the subframe. As of now, I have 3 jack stands just to hold the subframe as it drops. It's not too heavy of a piece as far as I can tell, so if you do decide to just grab it by hand, I don't think it should be the end of the world. And as you may be able to see, that is the last 18mm bolt, which we'll get out right now. So as you can tell, the subframe is officially unattached or detached from the car, and it's sitting on the jack stands. Now I'm just gonna figure out a way to wiggle it out and make sure it doesn't touch the engine hoist legs while I'm doing it, so that way we can finally go on the other side and access the turbos. Subframe from the jack stand and slowly lower it on the ground. The handy thing about the jack stands is that way your subframe doesn't really fall on the ground. Again, it's not heavy, and wow, I just realized there is a coolant pipe attached still that I did not unattach. So I'm gonna go ahead and undo this coolant hose, which I completely had no knowledge about. There we go, ladies and gentlemen. I doubt any ladies are watching this. However, the subframe is finally on the ground, and now I should be able to drag it towards me. And to be honest, after the subframe is pulled out of the way, I just can't wait to look at the turbos. Now under the car we clearly have these legs sitting in here which belong to the engine hoist. So the right way to do things, or the solution I came up with to make working under here easier, is to have a jack stand and have the jack stand support the weight of the engine, because for the rest of the process we don't really need the engine hoist. So under the car here, what we do is start taking out the downpipes. I took out one side already. So what you do is there's a 13mm bolt that sits right in here. You get it all the way out. You just kind of loosen up the clamp. And for this sensor, there is a 22mm bolt, 22mm wrench is needed to get the sensor out of the way. And at the bottom we also have downstream O2 sensors. These sensors you can just unplug, and the plug sits right under the transmission, which is not too bad. They do hang on using clips, so just undo the clips, and another 2 more 13mm bolts that hold it to the exhaust itself. Now the downpipes are out, we can take care of the engine mount. So with the engine mount out of the way, there is no specific order at this point. We pretty much have to get the U hose out of the way that attaches the water pump and the thermostat. The thermostat housing can come out of the way. It's a 2 10mm bolts. There's also this extra hose that goes to the thermostat. You can get this out of the way. And with this U hose out of the way, you get the plug-in out. I really like how the plug-in says BMW. In case you're under the car and you forget what car you're working on, which is a nice touch. I'll get this out of the way. And now this water pump is only held in by these two T-sized bolts. So my bad guys, I was wrong about the water pump. There's two bolts on this end, but when you come to the side there's also another bolt right there. I mean, relatively easy to get to once you do have everything out. So here we are guys, both of the coolant lines I have pried out. You kind of need to use a flathead because they do get stuck in there a little bit. And now this pipe is really loose, just 4 more E8 bolts and this is out. Now that's a better view. Things are starting to clean up, and in here we can get a pretty good view of the coolant lines. So the bottom one is actually the outlet line, the one we took out. As you can see, it's hanging. The top one is the one where the coolant flows in, and again it's also a T30. I'll go ahead and remove that if I can get a grip on it. One trick I've learned is just get a flathead in there, maybe hammer it in a little bit, and then if you pry on it, the line should come out. I mean, these lines have lived in there for more than 10 years, so they're a little stuck for sure. There you go, one of the line is out, and I'm just gonna try to wiggle it out of the way. Now it's time for the top one. Similar idea, I'm just gonna and as long as this is removed, the turbo should be free. Now I'll also get the oil line out. Let's let some oil drain out as well. And again, the oil line bolts are also T30s. There's the oil line gasket. Probably a good idea to change it. So after the drain oil line, now we need to take apart this intake hose. I'm not sure exactly what this is called, but this is the pipe that carries the pressurized air from each of the turbos to the intercooler itself. Even though it's twin turbo, it kind of works like a single turbo. So the bolt on this one is easy to get to. The bolt on this turbo, as you can see, the bolt, this is the metal pipe we're trying to take out. It's kind of hard to get to, so I took a T30 bit and pretty much taped it onto a 1/4 wrench. I don't know if you can see it. So this should do the trick because my normal ratchet was not getting in there, so I had to make this. Again, one more of the reasons why you should just pull the engine out. I'm sure there is a better tool to do this, but seems like this is getting the trick done. It'll just take a bit longer to get the job done. Now the pressurized turbo pipe is out of the way, and now it's time to get to the hardest bolt, to remove the hardest bolt in this entire job. The rusty bolt you see there is kind of hidden. That's the one we'll be taking out. There's one on each of the turbos, and it is for the oil feed line. So that's where the engine oil is fed into the turbo, and of course it comes out from the bottom. And yeah, that should be the hardest bolt in the entire job, and I am going to try to get to it now. Here we are guys, we have removed one of the turbo assemblies now. I kind of skipped the steps where I take out the studs, but on the one of the turbos is still on the car, so I could use that as an example. And now let's talk about the hardest bolt that we had to remove, and it's right here. I mean, even I'm holding the turbo, I can't really show it. Oh yeah, right here. So with this, I loosened all the studs around the turbo, and I kind of let the turbo fall and face towards me, and that's when I took out this line. I mean, the bolt was already out, but I had to pry out the line itself. So this is gonna be the hardest bolt of the job. So as I mentioned earlier, this is the upper oil line, and it has a bit of play in it. So the idea is that we take out all the turbo studs, let the turbo fall forward, and as it falls forward, we're able to access the bolt and pry the oil line out. So far, that's the only thing I can think of. I've tried multiple ways to get to that bolt. I haven't had much luck, so I'm just gonna go ahead and do it this way. A T50 or an 11mm. You could use either one. I mean, if you are doing a job of this magnitude, I'm confident you should be able to get to them. I might not be able to cover each and every bolt in this tutorial. There's one all the way back there as well. I mean, yeah, there's a few of them. I think there's 8 of them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah, 8 on this side. So this other side should also have 8. So let's get to it. So this one I already got out. This one is loose already. And this one I've kind of jammed an 11mm on, so as of now, all of the 8 studs are removed. There's only 3 things remaining now. One of them is the inlet pipe. The inlet pipe just, you pretty much just pry it out. It's not on by anything. There's a vacuum line, and of course, thirdly, the oil line at the top is still intact. So as the turbo has angle downwards, I'm hoping I can get in. I mean, still doesn't feel like there's a good angle going on. So guys, even with the turbo out and angle down, I am not having much luck getting this line out, the oil line. I'm sure there are multiple ways to do it, I just can't seem to figure them out. So now, the solution is I will be removing this bolt. This is the upper engine oil turbo feed line. I don't know what it's called, but you can see the left side is dangling. This goes to this turbo, and the same line goes to this turbo as well. So I will just remove the line and remove the turbo with the line. Let's see if this works. And this is a T45. So we just wiggle this line out, and now the other thing is that the oil line is really behind the shield, so might as well get these 2 bolts out for the heat shield, and then with the vacuum line out, I feel pretty optimistic the turbo should come out. Alright, the heat shield is out, and now if the turbo does not fall out, I would be very confused on what's holding it. There we go. It's loose. Okay, it's getting stuck here. And as I said, the vacuum line is kind of the last step. So that is the end of the video, guys. Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you in the next video where I upgrade these turbos.